Hello everyone, nice to meet you. I'm Xuan, a new storyteller, and welcome to my channel. Here, I'll be sharing strange and true stories based on real experiences from people across China. If contributors send me photos or videos along with their stories, I'll include them in the videos as well. Lastly, I wish you all smooth and peaceful days ahead. And now, our story begins. The first story in this episode comes from a friend I know in real life. The story is actually about one of his childhood friends. After hearing it, I have to say, it really stayed with me. For the sake of this story, I'll refer to him as Little A. As for Little A, he was the kind of kid parents always compare their own children to, the so-called perfect child. From a young age, he was good-looking, with rosy lips and bright white teeth. And he was incredibly smart. He picked things up very quickly and did exceptionally well in school. Back when they were in kindergarten, there was a phase where kids were encouraged to learn English. While most of the children were still struggling to memorize the 26 letters of the alphabet, Little A could already form simple English sentences. Back when they were in kindergarten, there was a phase where kids were encouraged to learn English. While most of the children were still struggling to memorize the 26 letters of the alphabet, Little A could already form simple English sentences. Then, one weekend, when they were about 5 or 6 years old, the contributor was playing with Little A and a few other kids. Out of nowhere, Little A suddenly collapsed. The children nearby were terrified and didn't know what to do. Some of the older kids immediately ran off to get the adults. They happened to be close to a small clinic in a nearby town, so the adults quickly brought a doctor over. But when the doctor arrived and checked his pulse, Little A's heart had already stopped beating. Right after that, the doctor began performing CPR while simultaneously dialing 120. Here is the emergency ambulance number in China. Fortunately, they managed to bring Little A back from the brink. Later, at the hospital, Little A underwent both a CT scan and an X-ray. The final diagnosis was congenital heart malformation, a bolt from the blue for his family. Back in the 90s, there was no cure for such a condition. The reason it hadn't manifested earlier was simply because he'd been too young. As he grew older, the illness would only worsen. Though the news was devastating, Little A's family was relatively well off at the time. His parents immediately took him to a hospital in Shanghai for treatment, but the result was the same. At the time, medical technology simply couldn't cure his condition. From that day on, his parents took him all over the country, visiting famous hospitals in major cities, hoping someone could help. But after years of trying, nothing improved. During those years, Little A's family fell into deep despair. His father ran a livestock farm, but because they were constantly traveling for treatment, the farm was almost shut down for several years. They spent years searching for a cure, but nothing worked. When medicine failed them, the family started looking for other ways. The first person they went to see was a very famous fortune teller in their town, someone like a psychic or a seer in Western cultures. The fortune teller said that Little A was born with a water fate, or shui min. Let me briefly explain what that means. In traditional Chinese belief, people are connected to the 5 elements: metal, wood, water, fire, and earth. In Chinese culture, this is called a mingge, or life fate. Many people believe that from the moment a person is born, certain parts of their life are already decided, like a blank piece of paper that already has some paths drawn on it. So why did Little A end up like that? It's because his fate leans heavily toward the yin, like the black half of a Taiji diagram. People with such a constitution tend to have weaker life force and are more prone to an early death. Though the fortune teller could see it, he admitted it was just too complex to unravel. He told Little A's parents they'd be better off seeking out another, more skilled diviner. Little A's parents began searching everywhere for anyone with reputed supernatural abilities. After a long journey, their search eventually led them to Henan province, where they heard about a renowned Chumaxier. A Chumaxier is a term from northeastern China, referring to a kind of spirit medium rooted in ancient shamanistic traditions. These mediums are believed to channel the powers of certain extraordinary animals, specifically the 5 immortals: the fox, weasel, hedgehog, snake, and rat known as Hu, Huang, Bai, Liu, and Hui in Chinese. It's said these animals can possess the medium, granting them supernatural abilities to help others, or themselves, solve otherwise intractable problems. After visiting the Chumaxier, the medium performed a ritual to invite the Xianjia, the spirit entities of those extraordinary animals we mentioned earlier. Through communication with these spirits, the medium investigated Little A's situation and finally gave an answer. The child had caught the attention of a very powerful entity. One of his 3 souls and 7 spirits had been taken. The Chu Ma Xian then said that whatever was targeting the child was extremely powerful. Even the spirits behind him, the Xianjia, were powerless to deal with it. This was something they simply couldn't handle after leaving the medium. Little A's parents once again took him everywhere, searching for doctors, remedies, and anyone who might be able to help. They spent more than a year traveling from place to place. During that year, little A didn't go to school at all. His health kept getting worse. He would often faint, and most of the time he looked dazed and exhausted. His lips had even started turning purple. Later, his parents went back to the Chu Ma Xian again to ask for more details. This time, they were told that the soul fragment taken from little A was called the Fu Shi Po. It was one of the 10 parts of the soul in the ancient Chinese belief of the 3 souls and 7 spirits. The Fu Shi Po was believed to be connected to the spleen and stomach. It was responsible for extracting the invisible essence from food and distributing it throughout the body, while also helping remove toxins. This time, the Chu Ma Xian told little A's parents something different. He said, "Let the child eat whatever he wants. Let him play. Try to fulfill as many of his wishes as possible." The meaning behind those words was clear. His time was running out. But even after hearing this, his parents still refused to give up. They even turned to the Catholic Church for help. Little A was baptized. Prayers were offered for him, but nothing changed. The priest who performed the baptism gently told the family that God seemed to favor this child in a special way, a statement that, in hindsight, would feel strangely significant. Still searching for answers, his parents traveled across the country, visiting well-known temples and Taoist sites. At one Taoist temple in Hebei, they consulted a priest there. After examining the situation, the priest gave a different explanation. He said little A had what is known as a tongzi ming. In traditional Chinese belief, this refers to someone who, in a previous life, served as a child attendant to a deity. For various reasons, such souls are reincarnated into the human world, sometimes to endure hardship, sometimes for reasons unknown. But in the end, they are meant to return back to where they came from. However, little A's case was different. His wasn't the kind that could be resolved through rituals. The priest said he was what they called a true tongzi ming, and for cases like this, there was nothing anyone could do, according to them. Onsi turned 7. Heaven would come to take him back. The Taoist priest also told the family something else. He said little A was what they called a shangyin bixing. In other words, he was associated with a star in the heavens. By that time, little A's soul was already beginning to slip away. The priest said very clearly that he would not make it past his 7th birthday. Besides that Taoist temple, the family also visited a temple in Yantai. The monk there gave a very complicated explanation, full of religious terms that none of the adults could remember. But unlike the Taoist priest, the monk did offer a solution. He said little A should become a monk. He should stay at the temple as a novice. If he did that, he might be able to survive this ordeal. His parents immediately asked how long he would have to stay before he could come home. The monk replied with just 4 words. To leave home is to have no home. In other words, if he became a monk, he would never return home again. Little A's family had been the only male line for 2 generations, so his parents could not accept this solution. They decided to keep searching for other ways. Only if there was truly no other option would they send him back to the temple. After leaving Yantai, they returned home. Little A was still very sick, and he started sleeping more and more every day. Sometimes, while he was asleep, his heart would suddenly stop beating. His family rushed him to the hospital several times, but the hospitals refused to admit him. Then, about 2 or 3 months before his 6th birthday, a relative came to visit. Little A called him second grandpa, his grandfather's half-brother. This second grandpa was a very capable man. He had been doing business in Southeast Asia for many years, in places like Singapore, Malaysia, and Thailand. He only came back to visit the family every few years. After hearing what happened to little A, he didn't stay long. He immediately got on a plane and left. About a month later, he came back, and this time, he brought someone with him. When that man arrived, the entire town saw him. He was wearing a suit and leather shoes, and looked exactly like a lawyer. When the man arrived at their home, little A's second grandpa treated him with great respect, addressing him as Bao En. That means repay kindness. Seeing this, little A's parents immediately understood. This was no ordinary person. They stepped forward and addressed him as Tian Shi. In Chinese tradition, that title carries a very heavy meaning, but for ordinary people, it's simply a respectful way of saying master. However, Bao En quickly waved his hands. He seemed uncomfortable. He told them not to call him that. "I'm not worthy of that title," he said. "Just call me Bao En." He then began to examine little A's fate. What he saw was completely different from what others had said. He told the parents something unexpected. He said he wanted to take little A away, according to him. The fate little A carried could lead to an extraordinary future. But his parents refused immediately. They couldn't bear to let him go. They begged Bao En desperately, even kneeling, even kowtowing. Perhaps moved by them, Bao En finally agreed to help. He said he would try to break this disaster that day. He changed into a different set of clothes, a green robe, prayer beads around his neck, another string of beads in his hand. His appearance was strange, neither clearly Buddhist nor Taoist. No one could tell where he came from. He first fed Little a strange green powder. Then, using a cinnabar brush, he began drawing symbols all over his body. Left side, right side, layer after layer of talismans. When he finished, he picked up a willow branch and began striking them off, again and again, until every mark was gone. Little later said that his body was covered in welts that day, but he felt no pain at all. For 8 days, Bao En repeated the same ritual, drawing symbols, and then striking them away. On the 8th day, he finally stopped. He told the family it was done. He said he had completely broken apart little A's fate. From that point on, nothing like this would happen again. But there was a cost. Little no longer had his original fate. His future would be much harder, and the family's fortune, the success of their farm, had all been tied to him. That luck would now disappear. After that, Bao En left, slowly. Little began to recover. By the time he was 7 or 8, he was completely healthy again. His father reopened the farm. But things were never the same. Not a loss, just no longer smooth. Now, little A is in his 20s. He's been healthy ever since. The story spread across nearby villages. Many people heard about what happened. Later, the contributor's father even asked several local Duangong, ritual specialists, to take another look. All of them were shocked. None of them had ever seen anything like it. No one knew where Bao En came from, and no one had ever seen someone forcibly break a person's fate like that. And that is where the story ends. This next story was shared with me by an internet user who goes by Sunflower. It is about something that happened to her father many years ago, back when he was still a young man. For the sake of our tale, let's call our protagonist Old Kui. Old Kui worked as part of a small rural construction crew. They built houses for people around their village, taking on jobs wherever they could find them. Sometimes there was work nearby, but when there wasn't, they'd travel far afield, taking whatever jobs they could get. To the east of their village ran a river, maybe 20 or 30 meters wide. Spanning the water was a rickety old wooden bridge, so narrow that only one person could cross at a time. If 2 people met in the middle, one would have to back up and let the other pass. On their side of the river, the bank dropped sharply, a steep incline, nearly vertical. If you didn't take the bridge, you'd have to make a long detour, easily adding half an hour to your journey. One time, Old Kui's team landed a job on the far side of the river. The road was terrible, and after crossing the bridge, you still had to ride a bicycle for another hour to reach the site. Worse yet, when the job was done, the family refused to pay them. Classic deadbeats. The team decided that whoever managed to collect the debt would get a bonus of 150 yuan. Back in those hard times, that was a significant sum. To put it in perspective, a day's work laying bricks brought in just 80 yuan, while today that same job might earn you 400. So the bonus was nearly 2 extra days pay enough to tempt a young man like Old Kui, who was still single and thinking about saving for a future wife. From then on, whenever work took them in that direction, Old Kui would stop by the house to ask for the money. Sometimes, even when he had no other reason to go, he'd visit them, hoping that maybe this time he'd get lucky and collect the debt. After all, that bonus would go a long way. One evening, Old Kui stopped by the house again to ask for the money. To his surprise, the family didn't argue or make excuses. They simply told him to wait, and before long, handed over the cash. It was more money than he was used to carrying, and the times were tough. Crime wasn't unheard of, especially on lonely country roads at night. If someone robbed you on the way home, there'd be no way to prove. It wasn't just an excuse to pocket the money yourself. So Old Kui decided to play it safe. He went to the little shop in the village and called his boss, asking him to come by car and pick up the cash. The boss had a small van they used for work, hauling tools and the crew from site to site. It felt safer to wait for backup, just in case. When the boss arrived, they settled up the accounts and paid Old Kui his well-earned 150 yuan bonus. They shared a quick meal together before the boss gave Old Kui a ride, dropping him off near the old bridge. This was before everyone had watches. Back then, a wristwatch was a rare luxury, and Old Kui certainly didn't have one, but judging by the darkening sky, he knew it was already late. So Old Kui decided to ride his bicycle straight across the bridge and head home. Taking the longer detour just seemed like too much after such a long day. He hopped on his bike and started pedaling toward the other side. As he was crossing, suddenly a dark shadow flickered in front of him. The sight startled Old Kui so much that he nearly tumbled off the bridge. He didn't get a clear look. Maybe it was just a bird or some small animal spooked by his sudden appearance. Not wanting to dwell on it, he kept going. But as he rode, he couldn't shake a chill that crept up his back, cold as if someone was breathing right down his neck. He didn't dare look behind him. In rural China, there's an old saying, if you walk a country road at night and turn around, you might lose a piece of your soul, all of your 3 souls and 7 spirits. In Chinese folklore, these are the spiritual components that make up a human being. Losing even one can bring misfortune or worse. Normally, it took only about a minute to walk across the bridge. But tonight, Old Kui had been pedaling for 5 minutes and still hadn't reached the other side. He began to wonder if he'd somehow ended up on the wrong bridge. Maybe his boss had dropped him off at the wrong spot in the darkness. He looked down and to his shock, realized he wasn't on a bridge at all anymore, but a dirt path. Yet, he could still hear the sound of running water nearby. Just then, he felt a sharp flick on the back of his head, like someone had snapped their finger at him. He spun around and saw, to his horror, a pair of legs. Someone was standing right on the back seat of his bicycle. Terrified, Old Kui leapt off his bike. When he looked back, the person had vanished, but his bicycle was rolling forward on its own, the wheels spinning as if someone was still riding it. Then he looked down and saw the dirt road had become a river. He was standing in water up to his waist. Nearby, he spotted the familiar old wooden bridge, and on it stood a figure. It was too dark to see the person's face or clothes, but they seemed unusually tall with long hair. Old Kui tried to wade to the bank, but his legs wouldn't move, as if something was gripping or tangling around his ankles. The current tugged at him, and suddenly he lost his balance and fell. He knew how to swim, but no matter how hard he tried, he kept sinking, unable to move as the water pulled him down. Just as he was about to give up, he saw 2 beams of light in the distance headlights coming towards him. He heard the sound of an engine, and in desperation, he shouted for help. The car pulled up, and someone jumped out. Who was it? None other than his construction team's boss. The boss rushed over and dragged Old Kui from the water. Once he caught his breath, Old Kui recounted everything that had just happened. The boss was so shaken by the story that he wasted no time. He helped Old Kui into the car and drove him straight home. That night, Old Kui's boss was too shaken to risk the lonely road home, so he stayed overnight at Old Kui's house. He confessed that he'd nearly reached his own home before suddenly realizing he was lost, unable to find his way, as if the road itself had vanished. Only then did he turn back, and from a distance, he heard someone calling for help. When he drove closer, it turned out to be Old Kui. The next morning, Old Kui woke up with aches all over. His head throbbed, and his legs felt sore. After resting for a while, he figured he might as well search for his bicycle while it was still daylight. Back then, bicycles were expensive, a real investment for a rural family, about as precious as a motorcycle is today. It didn't take long to find it. The boss was so shaken by the story that he wasted no time. He helped Old Kui into the car and drove him straight home. That night, Old Kui's boss was too shaken to risk the lonely road home, so he stayed overnight at Old Kui's house. He confessed that he'd nearly reached his own home before suddenly realizing he was lost, unable to find his way, as if the road itself had vanished. Only then did he turn back, and from a distance, he heard someone calling for help. When he drove closer, it turned out to be Old Kui. The next morning, Old Kui woke up with aches all over. His head throbbed, and his legs felt sore. After resting for a while, he figured he might as well search for his bicycle while it was still daylight. Back then, bicycles were expensive, a real investment for a rural family, about as precious as a motorcycle is today. It didn't take long to find it. The bike lay beneath the old wooden bridge, right where last night's terror had ended. As Old Kui pushed his bicycle home, he ran into a few fellow villagers, smoking and chatting by the roadside. After standing with them for a bit, he recounted his bizarre ordeal. Word spread quickly through the village. That little river may not look like much, but it's always been full of fish. Lately though, people fishing there began reporting strange things. They'd feel a tug, certain they'd hook something. But when they pulled up the line, the fish would be gone. And more disturbingly, every now and then someone would reel in a long strand of hair, something nobody had ever seen before. Once it happened, it kept happening, and Old Kui's story became just the beginning. Soon, there were more tales. Villagers coming home late would see someone standing on the bridge before they even reached it. No one dared cross anymore. They all took the long, winding detour. One day, 3 men from the village were heading home that way. As always, they saw a shadowy figure on the bridge and decided to go around. But as they glanced back, they saw the figure on the bridge waving at them, beckoning them to return. Suddenly, one of the 3 seemed transfixed, his eyes glassy and unfocused. He turned and started walking back toward the bridge, completely ignoring his friend's shouts. He moved with unnatural strength. Try as they might, they couldn't hold him back. The man reached the riverbank and jumped in. His friends panicked. They were all related in some way, and if anything happened to him, they'd never be able to face his family. They leapt in after him, grabbing him with all their strength, but he was still in a trance, staring blankly ahead. Desperate, one friend yanked off his shoe and slapped him across the face again and again until his face was swollen. Only then did he slowly come to his senses. When they finally pulled him out of the river, they found a tangled mass of long hair wrapped tightly around his legs, and within the hair, a piece of bone. After that, no one dared go near the bridge, not at night, not even in broad daylight. Sometime later, there was a heavy rainstorm, and the authorities upstream opened the floodgates. Remember the steep embankment on the village side of the river? After the flood, something even stranger happened. The rush of water from the open floodgates unearthed a coffin from the riverbank. When the villagers found it, the lid had already been knocked open. No one knew what it had collided with in the torrent. But inside, to everyone's horror, the coffin was packed full of long, tangled hair. The villagers banded together to haul the coffin out of the river. They found a quiet, out-of-the-way spot and buried it again, hoping to put whatever unrest lingered to rest. From that day forward, the old wooden bridge was all but abandoned. No one dared cross it, not at night, and not even in daylight. But this made life difficult for the villagers, who needed to travel in that direction. Every trip now meant a long detour. Eventually, the village elders decided to tear down the old bridge and build a new, wider one in its place. But even after the new bridge was finished, nobody would use it. The memory of what had happened lingered for years. Only after a long time, when the story had faded into the past, did people slowly begin to cross the bridge again. This is my first attempt at sharing such a tale. I hope you find it intriguing. If you have any suggestions or thoughts, I'd love to hear them. Thank you for reading.